At 5:37 a.m., Jennifer was already awake, mug in hand, staring at the glowing red deployment failure banner on her personal dashboard like it was a sunrise she'd seen too many times. Her phone buzzed with the third missed call from infrastructure. She didn't answer. She never did before coffee. Not anymore. Not after 12 years of being the ghost in the wires, the one who made sure the quarterly earnings report didn't vanish into a digital sinkhole, or that some sleep-deprived product manager didn't tank a compliance deadline by scheduling an update on a federal holiday. They called her the backbone, but only in the passive-aggressive tone of people who relied on you completely and resented you for it. Not a single system in that damn company functioned without the automated scheduler she'd built from scratch in the early days, before anyone realized how vital it would become. She didn't just run scripts. She designed the heartbeat. And like most heartbeats, no one noticed it until it skipped. The newer folks didn't know that. To them, she was just the legacy SME, corporate speak for the old broad who knows where the digital bodies are buried. The new VP of product, Todd, yes, Todd, because of course he had a name like that, barely even looked at her during his first all-hands. Called her Janet once, told her she could probably start documenting her systems before they moved to a real automation suite. Jennifer smiled, didn't flinch, didn't correct him, just added a note to her internal log. January 3rd, Todd's countdown begins. And if you've made it this far, do me and my caffeine-fueled comrades a favor. Tap that like button and subscribe. Yeah, I know it's cliché, but 95% of folks listening to these stories forget. The more love this story gets, the more of these office horror comedies we can unearth from the beige cubicle trenches. Go on, it means a lot more than you think. Back to Jennifer, who had long ago mastered the art of being essential without being seen. She didn't wear power blazers. She didn't give lunchtime keynotes or post think pieces on LinkedIn. She just showed up, patched things before they broke, left by 5:02 p.m. unless the building was literally on fire. And once, it had been. She'd evacuated after finishing the audit logs. Her workstation was a quiet corner in a mostly forgotten floor, right beside a flickering light fixture that no one ever replaced. Most days, she could go 6 hours without a single person acknowledging her presence, which suited her fine. It's easier to run the system when no one realizes you are the system. That's what they missed when they passed her over for the lead engineer role last year. Some fresh-faced Stanford import with an expired Docker tattoo and a penchant for micromanaging got the job instead. She even trained him for 2 miserable months while he called her low-key brilliant and asked if she could translate her scripts into something more modern. Jennifer translated them, all right, to a folder labeled Suck It Legacy that she quietly moved to cold storage the day his onboarding ended. She didn't complain, didn't even show it bothered her. What was the point? You raise your voice and suddenly you're difficult. You say nothing and somehow you're not ambitious enough. She'd played this game too long to think there was a right answer. The only winning move was knowing when to fold and when to flip the damn table. But she wasn't there yet. Not then. At that point, Jennifer still believed in the illusion of merit. That maybe, just maybe, someone would realize that the uptime dashboards, the rollout calendars, the vendor syncs, the payroll triggers, were all still tethered to the same quiet machine humming under her login. But no one asked. They just assumed someone somewhere had migrated it all to the cloud, because that's what the shiny new documentation said. She used to correct them. Used to remind them the scheduler was home-brewed, custom-coded, permissions-tied, and entirely unmonitored by anyone but her. But somewhere around the 6th reorg and 12th rebrand, she stopped. Let them believe what they wanted. After all, she hadn't written herself out of the system, just out of their memory. And the moment Jennifer realized that, the moment she understood that her invisibility wasn't a curse, but a camouflage, was the moment the clock started ticking for every last smug executive who thought they ran the place. She didn't need titles. She had keys, and not the kind you can copy at Home Depot. It was supposed to be a quick strategy alignment, 20 minutes tops. Just Jennifer, the VP, a Slack channel full of yes men, and a slide deck vomiting buzzwords like agility and real-time resource optimization. Todd, whose business degree had clearly come from a vending machine that accepted entitlement, was pitching yet another cost-cutting measure. This one involved trimming redundancy in their automation protocols. You know, the ones that kept their billion-dollar operations from turning into a flaming dumpster every fiscal quarter. Jennifer let him finish. Let him gloat. Let him say words like legacy architecture, like he even understood the wiring diagram on the napkin she'd hand-sketched the scheduler on back in 2012. Then, in her usual glacier-calm tone, she spoke 3 sentences. If you remove the fallback nodes, you eliminate the buffer during batch surges. That will stall compliance reporting. Finance deadlines don't shift just because you're allergic to backups. The silence afterward was thick, not tense, just thick, like everyone was waiting to see who flinched first. Todd didn't flinch. He smirked. And then came the line that would become a legend in company folklore: lose the attitude or lose your $200K bonus. Delivered with the confidence of a man who thought sending it via text at 11:58 p.m. made him powerful instead of petty. Jennifer didn't reply with outrage. She didn't tell him to go screw himself with a fiber cable, just typed a single word, copy. Not okay, not sure thing, just copy, like she was logging a radio transmission, like she was updating the system before a controlled shutdown. She set her phone down, opened her terminal, and started backing up her personal logs. Not because she was scared, not because she had anything to hide, just because she knew exactly where this road led, and she was already 5 steps ahead of the next turn. No drama, no threats, just insurance. People underestimate the quiet ones, the ones who don't grandstand, the ones who don't give you a second chance to disrespect them because you never even saw the first one land. Jennifer wasn't passive, she was precise. And if Todd had paid even a sliver of attention during his first onboarding week, he might have noticed that the entire company's automation spine was still logged under a single, aging credential: hers. Sure, were surface-level dashboards. Sure, a few teams thought they had visibility, but visibility wasn't ownership. Visibility was a polite illusion, and Jennifer had never handed over the keys because no one ever asked for them. Why would they? She always showed up, always fixed things, always stayed late, always bled silently into the network. Now she was done bleeding. She logged every process tied to her credentials, set expiration timestamps on token chains, exported architecture snapshots to an encrypted drive, and just for fun, highlighted every executive override that had quietly failed over to her backup scripts in the last 3 years. There were dozens. One had prevented a $9.3 million loss in a vendor overpayment cycle. Did anyone thank her? No. They'd sent her a coffee gift card. It bounced. Todd probably thought he'd issued a warning. A threat, even. What he couldn't realize, was that Jennifer had already lived through 5 versions of him. Different haircuts, same jawline, same condescension, same fetish for buzzwords and boardroom theatrics. But none of them had ever texted her that late. None of them had ever said the quiet part so loud. She closed her laptop and looked around her apartment. Soft blue hum of her home terminal reflected off the framed "Thank you for your years of service" certificate from 2017. Signed by a COO who had since been escorted out for insider trading. It was all so ridiculous, so small. They'd spent a decade relying on her, and the first time she questioned a poor decision, they dangled her livelihood like a chew toy. Well, she hoped Todd liked chew toys, because come sunrise, the systems he thought he understood would start coughing up error messages like a hungover server room. And Jennifer? She'd be on vacation. The kind where you don't answer emails. The kind where your name keeps showing up in audit logs while the building burns down. The kind where copy was the last word they heard before the silence started screaming. At 2:11 a.m., with her apartment drenched in that sickly glow only dual monitors and a neglected microwave clock can produce, Jennifer leaned back and stared at the most boring screen in corporate tech, the system-level access registry. It was a digital graveyard, a forgotten corner of internal infrastructure, buried so deep even the interns didn't joke about it. But Jennifer didn't come here to joke. She came to verify a suspicion that had been gnawing at her spine ever since Todd's late-night tantrum. Had anyone at all, ever reassigned the scheduler? She clicked once, twice, entered her master credential chain, still active, still valid, still God tier. A second later, the access matrix bloomed across the screen, each column an artery, each row a beat. It was beautiful in its own bleak way. Quiet, stable, and utterly overlooked. There it was, line 283, the system scheduler, ID'd internally as JN-Sched 001, created by Jennifer L. Sloan on April 14, 2013. Owner, J.L. Sloan, privileges, Full administrative, override authority, termination control, successor assignment. Null, null, she blinked, then smiled. Not out of joy, Jennifer didn't smile for joy anymore. It was the smile you give when you realize the house you built had been declared abandoned by squatters who never checked the deed. The smile of someone who knows the storm is coming, but also knows exactly where they put the fuse box. They'd built everything on top of her scheduler. Deployment rollouts, compliance checks, payroll automation, even the daily good morning, team, emails that pinged Slack at 8 a.m. on the dot like some chirpy AI intern. All of it was propped up by a legacy heartbeat no one had ever bothered to decouple. Because decoupling required effort, documentation, reading things Jennifer wrote in monospace font. And now all those things were tied to an account belonging to a woman whose bonus had been threatened by a man who wore loafers with no socks and said things like synergize the backlog. She didn't touch anything. That's important. She didn't alter permissions, flip any switches, or pull any plugs. She just looked, like a homeowner checking her front door camera footage after seeing muddy footprints on the porch. Then she opened a fresh notebook, not digital, actual paper, leather-bound, gifted to her years ago by a project manager who'd since quit to become a professional crystal healer. Page 1, Ownership Confirmation JN-SCED 001, Current Role Holder, J.L. Sloan, last accessed, 2023 to 12 to 0702, 1142, succession assigned. None, she wrote it down in clean, surgical handwriting. No frills, just facts. Jennifer understood now. Todd hadn't just threatened her bonus. He'd invited her to verify something she'd suspected since the day he swaggered in with his faux humility and a whiteboard full of acronyms he couldn't define. He thought the scheduler had been reassigned, assumed it had evolved, scaled, been replatformed by a real dev team, but no one ever bothered to migrate it because it worked, because Jennifer never let it fail, because fixing it didn't make the quarterly highlights, because if you're good at making fire drills not happen, people forget there were ever matches. She leaned back and flipped to page 2. Impact scan, batch jobs, 413 active, mission critical, 72% compliance died. 11. Rollback paths, 0, redundancy check. Disabled by Ops Q1 initiative, that last one made her whistle low. They really had disabled the backups for cost savings. She'd warned them, wrote a whole report, presented it. HR changed the font on her slides and forwarded it to legal for awareness. Then filed it under escalated but deprioritized. Strategic detachment settled over her like a weighted blanket soaked in irony. She didn't feel rage, not even bitterness, just awake, like that moment in the horror movie when the protagonist stops screaming and starts reaching for the axe. There were names she could have pinged, people she trusted, engineers who still spoke her name with a kind of reverence usually reserved for ghosts or saints. But she didn't, because she wasn't sounding an alarm. Not yet. She simply closed the notebook, backed up her personal access token to an encrypted drive named Notebox, shut her laptop. The house was quiet, so was the system. But Jennifer knew the clock had already started ticking. And no one, not legal, not Todd, not the architecture review committee with their color-coded flowcharts, no one was watching the countdown. It started with a hiccup, barely a burp in the system logs. At 6:03 a.m., a small but mission-critical deployment failed to trigger. Nothing major, just a scheduled compliance script meant to push anonymized usage data to their largest European client. A job that, by contract, had to execute daily or risk penalty clauses. Todd never read the fine print. He thought penalty clauses were just legal theater. Jennifer knew better. She'd helped write them. By 6:20, payroll's auto-batching process threw a warning, one of those delightfully vague red banners that says unable to locate authorization object, in a font that screams we don't know what we're doing, but please panic quietly. No one noticed at first. The early shift was busy setting up a roadmap sync Todd had requested, something about aligning Q4 synergies before the overseas call. Jennifer's name was still on the invite, declined it 2 days ago with a smiley face and the message. UO recharge mode activated smiling face with smiling eyes. That same smiley face would later appear in a screenshot legal printed during the investigation. By 8:11 a.m., a junior dev named Sanjay posted a message in hash and for ops. Hey, anyone know why the scheduler logs say no owner assigned? Is that normal? No one replied for 13 minutes. When they did, it was Todd. Who? Classic fashion, tagged the wrong person. At Sandra Loop in the IT folks. This is probably a permissions refresh thing. Not urgent. The irony being, there was no Sandra in IT. There was a Sandra in finance, who hadn't logged in since maternity leave started in April. Meanwhile, another team downstream noticed that their deployment pipeline was stuck on pending approval, a setting that hadn't existed in over a year. It was a ghost lock. Fallback Jennifer had coded during the winter of vendor outages 2 years ago, designed to activate only if the root scheduler went dark or got reassigned without proper authorization. It was never supposed to trigger, not unless something was deeply wrong. And yet, there it was. Stuck, silent, blinking like a digital middle finger. Slack threads multiplied. People started bumping old threads. Engineers opened Jira tickets marked urgent in all caps, which were promptly auto-assigned to Jennifer by the routing system, one that she had configured, and which no one had bothered to update. Each one bounced back with the same out-of-office message, currently offline. If this is a scheduler issue, please refer to internal documentation. There was no internal documentation. Not the real stuff. Not the kind that explained the weird little toggles, or the buried access triggers, or why everything, HR automation to the legal compliance tracker, somehow still pinged a scheduler named JNSCHED001. Sanjay messaged his team lead again. I dug into the metadata. Owner field literally says null, like not empty, just null. Can a system even run like that? No reply. At 9:02, a QA analyst manually triggered a batch job, something that was supposed to auto-run at 7 o'clock. It hung for 4 minutes. Then crashed. Log it left behind was a single line of code, pushed by Jennifer in 2017. If you're reading this, it means something very stupid has happened. Someone laughed when they saw it. Nervously. By 9:35, finance called Todd's office directly. 3 ACH transfers hadn't cleared. One of them was flagged for exceeding internal thresholds, limit Jennifer had hard-coded after an exec accidentally sent $85,000 to a vendor that sold branded thermoses. Todd, mid-latte, waved it off. It's just some legacy bug. Get DevOps to rerun the tasks. DevOps tried. DevOps failed. One engineer manually attempted to reroute through a backup Jenkins node, only to discover that the job was locked behind a deprecated token, again, belonging to Jennifer. By lunchtime, IT had launched a quiet internal investigation. Not a crisis yet, just concern. Systems were behaving like spoiled cats, ignoring commands, knocking over workflows, deleting nothing but breaking everything. And through it all, Jennifer said nothing. She was, by all appearances, on a beach somewhere. The kind of beach where sunburned toddlers throw sand and mojitos cost more than rent. She wasn't. She was home in her worn hoodie, watching her old terminal logs refresh. Not because she needed to, just to see how long it would take before someone noticed the fires were spreading. And they were. Small ones at first, smoldering inconsistencies, missed pings, unexpected behavior. But Jennifer didn't need to stoke the flames. She'd already pulled the oxygen. The ticket was logged at 10:42 a.m. under the vague but ominous title scheduler instability urgent triage. Nobody wanted to be the one to write it, let alone own it. It sat in limbo for 23 minutes until Jorge from IT finally claimed it with the same enthusiasm you'd assign to adopting a raccoon with rabies. The first thing he did was run a simple system trace. Just a pulse check, really. Instead, he got a wall of red, deprecated packages, expired tokens, scripts running on versions of libraries that hadn't been supported since the previous administration. Scheduler, the core scheduler, hadn't been updated in 428 days. No code changes. No access logs from anyone except one user, JL Sloan, Jennifer. She hadn't touched the system in over 6 months, and yet her credentials were still the only ones with full write access. The rest of the engineering team had read-only visibility through mirrored dashboards that hadn't refreshed properly since Q2. Jorge blinked, scrolled, then leaned back so hard he nearly snapped his desk chair. He flagged the ticket to security and copied legal. Just in case. 2 floors up, Todd was elbow-deep in a team stand-up where he was attempting to pivot the term incident into agile stress test. His voice carried down the hallway with that forced corporate confidence only possessed by men who still referred to women as females. Nervous product manager had just informed him that the client dashboard had failed to render its Q3 projections, again, tied to the scheduler's midnight batch. Todd waved it off. That's a dev ops thing, we'll hotfix it. But when Jorge dropped the report in the Slack channel, one line in bold, blinking like a siren, Todd's voice faltered. Scheduler owner, J.L. Sloan, no successor assigned, the channel went quiet. Then one of the interns, not realizing he was in the wrong thread, sent a popcorn emoji. Todd messaged HR in a private side channel. Start compiling documentation. We might need to escalate a performance concern. Noncompliance or negligence, whatever sticks. It was the digital equivalent of grabbing a mop while the dam breaks. HR, ever the eager compliance lackeys, opened a file on Jennifer Sloan for failure to transition critical infrastructure assets. Never mind that no one had ever asked her to transition anything. Never mind that every quarterly planning doc, every sprint outline, every platform upgrade roadmap had conveniently skipped the part where you migrate the only system holding the entire backend together. Jennifer had warned them. Not loudly, not with a tantrum, just repeatedly. In emails no one read, in Jira comments no one acknowledged, architecture review meetings where she was routinely placed last on the agenda and cut short when people wanted to get to happy hour. So when HR pinged her with a cheerful "Hey, mind hopping on a quick sync to clarify your role in some legacy architecture," she didn't reply. She didn't need to. The dominoes were already leaning. Legal's request for admin logs went out at 11:29 a.m. The security team complied within 7 minutes. Resulting spreadsheet looked like something out of a conspiracy board. Every critical job, every high-stakes process, every emergency fallback, all tied to Jennifer's ID. They even found a comment she'd left in one shell script. If this still points to me, it means nobody did their job. Good luck, future morons. The lawyer reading it choked on his thermos coffee. Is that admissible? He asked no one. Depends who sues who, someone muttered. Meanwhile, inside Todd's corner office, sleek, sterile, and decorated like an influencer's airbnb, he was pacing. Eyes darting from his laptop to his phone to the one spreadsheet Legal had shared in a panic. His hand hovered over his cell, thumb shaking like a drunk compass needle. He considered calling Jennifer, personally, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Because if he did, it meant admitting she'd built something he didn't understand. Something he couldn't control. And Todd, king of PowerPoint decks and LinkedIn humblebrags, did not lose control. So instead, he called HR again. Can we freeze her access? He asked. Technically, came the reply, she still holds primary credentials on that system. Locking her out might make things worse. How much worse? We're still triaging. But preliminary findings suggest, severe system dependencies. He hung up without saying goodbye. Across town, Jennifer sat in the same hoodie, same chair, same quiet apartment. No music, no distractions, just the occasional chirp of her inbox syncing useless automated alerts. She ignored them all. She was watching now, not intervening, just witnessing the structure buckle under the weight of its own ignorance. Because here's the thing about building something no one else understands. They don't know how to break it. But you know exactly where the cracks will spread. At exactly 8:01 a.m., the silence broke, not with an explosion, not with smoke or sparks, but with a single, sterile error message blinking across the central ops dashboard in a shade of red that looked more arterial than digital. Access denied credential, invalid. The system didn't crash. It simply stopped, like a bus that calmly refuses to open its doors, like a deadbolt turning from the inside while everyone's still chatting on the porch. In payroll, the morning batch job hung in mid-execution. Salaries for 1,200 employees paused. The compliance bot failed to dispatch the quarterly audit package to their top-tier financial regulator, a document tied to performance bonuses for 3 VPs and the company's public reporting schedule. The data was prepared. The templates were in place. The task was scheduled, but the heartbeat was gone. The scheduler didn't malfunction. It didn't corrupt or bug out. It simply failed to verify ownership. In doing so, it obeyed the one rule Jennifer had baked in from the very beginning. If the owner ID expires, do nothing. Not even scream. At 8:04, IT started getting pings. Not from developers, but from finance. Always the first to notice when the money stops flowing. Accountants whose lives revolved around ACH timelines and who understood that a delay meant penalty fees, bad PR, and very angry people in expensive suits. Ops chimed in. Their deployment tracker wouldn't load, stuck in a recursive loop trying to ping a scheduling system that was, technically, still there, but now sealed off like a tomb with no map back in. Todd was in a live innovation sync with external stakeholders when his Slack began detonating. He ignored the first few. When his assistant burst into the room, breathless, and said, "Legal's in panic mode," he sighed and muted his mic. "What now?" She didn't answer, just turned his laptop toward him. On the screen, 4 separate terminal logs blinked the same status. Owner not recognized, job canceled, owner, J.L. Sloan. He stared. The name might as well have been written in blood, or neon. At that very moment, on the legal call already in progress with compliance auditors and a board representative from an external risk review firm, the company's general counsel went pale. They were reviewing the audit checklist, annual routine until now, and the automation scheduler that's owned by. The silence that followed was total. Then a single voice, legal's junior compliance analyst, Megan, offered a squeaky reply. "I think it's still tied to Jennifer Sloan's ID." The head of legal, mid-sip of his lukewarm coffee, stood up so fast his chair screeched across the hardwood and toppled. "Please tell me she didn't own the scheduler," he said, to no one in particular. No one answered, because everyone in the room knew. Back in DevOps, engineers were frantically scrubbing the permissions log. The evidence was undeniable. Jennifer's ID hadn't been accessed since 11:52 p.m. 2 nights ago. There was no trace of malice, no deletions, no command triggers, just silence. A clean cessation. One engineer, brows furrowed, pointed to a comment in the last metadata update. Owner heartbeat check, 48 hours from last session. If expired, pause tasks, do not reroute, not a sabotage, not an attack, a safeguard. A digital do not resuscitate order signed by the very person they'd ignored, belittled, and shoved to the organizational fringes. At 8:22, clients started emailing. The compliance report hadn't arrived. One of them threatened to escalate to their legal team if they weren't given a valid timestamp within the hour. At 8:37, HR, still working on Jennifer's disciplinary documentation, was told to pause immediately. A new directive came down from legal. Locate Jennifer Sloan. Get her on the phone. Do not threaten, do not pressure, do not escalate. Todd tried calling her directly. 1 ring, 2, straight to voicemail. Her out-of-office message hadn't changed. Currently offline. Not checking messages. If this is urgent, it probably wasn't designed correctly in the first place. By 9 o'clock, no one was pretending anymore. The morning all hands was canceled. Engineers stopped pushing code. Product managers deleted their Trello boards like it would reverse the damage. And Jennifer, she was watching, not smug, not gleeful, just still. She sipped her tea, the expensive one she never let herself buy. Watched the sun spill through her window and over the edge of the notebook on her desk. The one with every system she'd ever touched, every handoff they never made, every line of code they assumed was self-sustaining. At 9:03, she opened her email. A message waited at the top. Subject, urgent consulting request from General Counsel, CC, CU, Legal, HR, Body. We'd like to discuss a restoration pathway. At your convenience. Please advise. She didn't reply. Not yet. The silence was still speaking for her, and it was louder than Todd had ever been. Word sabotage had been thrown around like confetti in a hurricane for the past 3 hours, mostly by executives trying to save face in Slack threads and video calls that now felt more like tribunals than meetings. Todd said it first, of course, at 8:57 a.m. In a panic call to legal, she disabled it. She must have. Pull the logs, call security. This is an attack. By 10:14, the full audit report was in, and it read like a confession, not the kind Todd wanted. Jennifer hadn't touched the system in nearly 48 hours. No deletions, no overrides, no command line executions. She hadn't changed a single line of code. The scheduler failed to verify a valid session token from the owner ID. That was it. Jennifer didn't bring the building down. She just walked out of the server room and let them realize no one else had the keys. Security audit team's findings were presented on a hastily scheduled emergency Zoom call. On screen were 3 color-coded blocks representing the critical nodes of the automation system, each one labeled orphaned, owner ID null. The consultant from the third-party firm leaned in, squinting. Wait, this system was still using heartbeat verification. The CTO nodded stiffly. Yes, legacy architecture. The consultant scrolled. Why wasn't there a fallback owner ID? No answer. Why didn't anyone migrate the scheduler permissions? Silence. She looked up from her screen. You do understand that this isn't a breach. This isn't even a failure. She paused, searching for a word. This is exactly what the system was designed to do. The call went quiet, the way only a call full of high-ranking executives can go quiet, like everyone's internet died at once. But no, we're just processing the fact that Jennifer hadn't burned the house down. She just turned off the porch light and closed the door behind her. At 10:46, legal issued a formal internal statement. Preliminary audit findings confirm no malicious behavior. System access expired due to inactive session linked to sole owner credential. Restoration of services will require consent and credential input from said owner. They didn't use her name. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. The CTO was the first to say it aloud. We're screwed without her. HR, still recovering from their attempt to issue a warning letter the day prior, deleted the draft and quietly changed her employee status from under review to active pending special circumstances. Todd, meanwhile, was in his office, watching his career dangle from the same thread he tried to cut with a single arrogant text. His phone sat face down on the desk, screen still cracked from where he'd hurled it at the floor after the compliance officer muttered, "You let the only license holder walk off unpaid." At 11:07, another report came in, this one from risk management. It contained two options. Option A, obtain credential restoration from Jennifer Sloan. Estimated recovery time, 3 hours. Estimated cost, TBD subject to negotiation. Option B, rebuild scheduler infrastructure from ground up. Estimated recovery time, 9-12 weeks. Estimated cost, $1.80. $2.4 million plus vendor contract breaches. Todd read it 4 times. Then circled option A, then poured himself 3 fingers of cheap whiskey from the bottle he kept in a fake employee recognition mug. Across town, Jennifer was folding laundry. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't watching them flail in real time. Her email client was closed. Phone was in airplane mode. Her only notification came from an old script she'd written years ago, a passive log scanner that pinged her when systems she built entered a dormant state. It had pinged at exactly 8:01 a.m. She smiled, just once. Quiet. The kind of smile that doesn't reach your eyes, but folds neatly into the corners of your mouth like the sharp edge of a paper cut. They were learning now. That control isn't always loud, that real power doesn't strut into meetings or shout over calls. Real power is knowing that if you stop moving, the whole machine remembers who made it breathe in the first place. She brewed another cup of tea. Jasmine, this time, something about the calmness of it. She didn't plan to stay offline forever. But for now, let them stew. Let them feel the absence. Let them tally every second that passed without the comforting pulse of her login whispering, "It's handled," into the guts of their empire. By the time she returned, they'd understand. Not who she was, but what she'd been holding in place all along. At 7:19 a.m., the next morning, a black car pulled up in front of Jennifer's quiet brick townhouse. No company logos, no flashing lights, just one of those luxury sedans reserved for high-ranking legal counsel or people trying to avoid being photographed outside a courthouse. A woman stepped out, all charcoal gray wool and scuffed heels, clutching a slim leather folio that probably cost more than most employees' laptops. She didn't knock. She didn't even make it to the porch. The door stayed closed. Jennifer had already made her move. 12 hours prior, she'd opened her laptop, clicked through to her encrypted drive, and drafted a document titled simply, Restoration Agreement J.L. Sloan. The tone was cold, professional, and unmistakably clear. It wasn't a request. It wasn't even a negotiation. It was a rescue fee. The email she sent to legal's senior partner came with no pleasantries. No hope you're well, no small talk. Just the contract. PDF attached. Subject line, offer valid until noon. Terms were explicit. Restoration of all compensation owed, including the $200,000 performance bonus previously threatened, plus damages and retroactive hazard pay for structural failure prevention. A formal written apology addressed directly to Jennifer Sloan from executive leadership, acknowledging hostile conduct by executive staff, to be filed internally and attached to her permanent employee record. Limited consulting engagement with defined hours, no on-call requirement, and 0 non-compete clause. Term, 6 months. Fee, $1.3 million, upfront, no installments, her final clause. Upon completion of restoration, all system ties to J.L. Sloan credentials will be permanently revoked by Jennifer Sloan personally. I will then walk away. Forever. The message ended with a single line: if unacceptable, please proceed with your infrastructure rebuild. You'll find the previous timelines optimistic. By 8:03 a.m., the firm had replied, not with resistance, not even with questions, just a simple, we're reviewing the offer internally. Please stand by. Internally, they weren't reviewing anything. They were scrambling, because the board had finally been looped in and the mood was apocalyptic. No compliance, no payroll, no product launches. Vendors pulling out, partners suspending contracts, and the whisper campaign had already begun. The kind of whispers that leak to blogs, the kind that make investors nervous. By 8:45, Todd had been placed on leave. The email was phrased like a sabbatical, but no one who saw his face as he packed his office believed he'd be back. He didn't make eye contact with anyone, didn't even pretend to hold his head high, just shoved a half-used bottle of cologne into his laptop bag and left without speaking. Jennifer had become a phantom in the building, a name whispered in cautionary tones, a ghost whose absence had done more damage than any action she could have taken. At 9:17, the interim COO called an emergency board session. At 9:42, the vote was unanimous: accept her offer. But there was one problem. She hadn't picked up her phone, hadn't replied to their messages. She hadn't acknowledged the in-person visit, because Jennifer wasn't interested in begging. She wasn't interested in making anyone feel comfortable. For the first time in her career, she held the position executives fantasized about: complete, unshakable leverage. And she liked how it felt. She opened her inbox at 10:03 a.m. to 13 unread messages, including one from legal with the subject, urgent. Restoration agreement accepted contingent edits. She didn't even click it. She replied, no edits, no contingencies, I wrote it once. I won't write it again, you have until noon. Then she closed her laptop, made another cup of tea, watered her spider plant, and waited. At 11:46 a.m., the final email came in. Signed, countersigned, payment processed, apology attached. Her consulting access was restored. Her terms, every one of them met. No celebration, no champagne, no smug monologue into a mirror. She just logged in, clicked 3 buttons, restored the scheduler, watched the system breathe again, then deleted every access token tied to her name and logged out. Her power wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The loud ones had already fallen. Jennifer wasn't interested in revenge. She was interested in removal, in closure, erasing the part of herself that once gave people like Todd the benefit of the doubt. Now, she gave them invoices. The clock struck noon with the quiet brutality of a guillotine. No alarms, no fireworks, just the steady, robotic chime of synced company clocks ticking over in perfect rhythm. Across boardrooms, Slack channels, and war room Zoom calls, there was a collective breath held, then dropped, like the whole organization had been waiting for judgment. It didn't last until 12:01. The last signature hit the PDF at exactly 11:59:47. The final initials came from the interim COO, who had replaced Todd in every way that mattered: title, authority, emergency blame receptacle. By then, Todd's office had already been cleaned out, the nameplate peeled off, the residual scent of fake citrus cologne dissipating like bad decisions after a storm. Jennifer was notified via auto-reply. Not a person, not a call, just a flat, sterile system-generated message with a link to her secure portal. The subject line simply read, all terms met, access granted. She didn't smile, didn't sigh, just walked across the room, slid into her chair, and opened her laptop like it was any other morning. One by one, she reactivated the scheduler nodes, restarted the heartbeat, released the locked batch jobs from digital purgatory. It took 6 minutes. The logs flowed like blood returning to a sleeping limb. Painless, clinical, alive. She didn't add her name back into the system, didn't make herself look like a hero. Instead, she queued up the deletion of her own credentials, one by one, until the final screen read, owner, none next. To be assigned, she left them a single note. You don't need me anymore. Just need to be better stewards of what you rely on. Then she clicked confirm. Her screen went dark. She closed the laptop, stood up, and slipped the consulting contract into a slim leather folder beside the framed certificate she dusted off that morning, in recognition of outstanding internal infrastructure contributions 2016. The year no one remembered because everything worked. The contract was real, 7 figures. No non-compete. 6 months of work if she chose to take it. But Jennifer didn't sign it for the money. She signed it to make the silence official, to end it on her terms. And then, because she was thorough, she took the elevator to the top floor. The executive suite was eerily quiet, stripped of its usual hum of overconfidence. Jennifer moved past the reception desk, through the glass corridor, and paused at the corner office. Todd's office. Empty, desk bare. Monitor gone. Only a faint outline of his chair on the carpet, like even the furniture had grown tired of holding his weight. She looked through the glass for a moment. No triumph, no vengeance, just closure. The sound of her boots on polished tile echoed as she turned and walked away. On her way out, the new interim CTO caught a glimpse of her and opened his mouth to speak, but stopped. She gave a small nod. That was enough. Jennifer didn't need applause, didn't need a LinkedIn post or a standing ovation from the people who had ignored her warnings for years. She had something far rarer. Proof. Proof that the backbone they overlooked had held everything together. And the moment she stepped back, it all cracked. That's the thing about quiet power. You never see it coming, but you always feel it when it leaves. As she stepped into the sunlight outside, phone off, bag light, spine straight, she whispered, just once to herself, to the world, to the memory of a man who thought intimidation was strategy. Lose the attitude. Sure, I'll lose yours first. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.